Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about wrestling with God. This has just been a remarkable week for me. I got to spend some time with Jordan Peterson, which was crazy. Now, before you get too carried away with that idea, it was me and about 10,000 other people. He was in Fort Worth, Texas, and I snapped up some tickets, so my wife and I went, and we ended up sitting 14th row center. I was so excited to attend this event, and so I want to talk to you today just about what that was all about, and what some of the key takeaways were, and why this was just such an important talk, I think, for all of us. And so I thought I would just share a little bit about the setting, what some of my key takeaways were, just kind of the transformation that I've been going through, and that I think perhaps you might be if you are one who wrestles with God or the idea of God. What's the purpose? What are the plans that he has for you? And so I just want to kind of walk you through that today. So let me just describe the event. So I got there about half hour early, and it was just such a great cast of characters there. My wife and I kind of chuckled because we got there a little bit early, and we saw a group of about 10 nuns who were all standing in line waiting to get a hot dog before going. And the place just slowly filled in. I thought, boy, there's not too many people here. And then suddenly by the time it started, the place was packed. And it was men, women, really all ages, but I was surprised. A lot of 30-year-old kind of, mid-30s, early 40s. That seemed to be the bulk of the demographic. And being from Fort Worth, and as part of the Bible Belt, I think the topic of wrestling with God really had an impact. So there was a lot of energy, and if I didn't know what to expect, if you've never been to a Jordan Peterson, I'm sure you've heard his podcast, and my wife was asking me, what is this going to be like? I mean, is this like a podcast? Well, in his podcast, he does interviews. But in his live shows, when he came out, he described why he does these live shows, and he calls them lectures. And a lecture is different than a talk, a memorized talk. In his lectures, everyone is different. And so even though this was probably the third or fourth one on his tour, it was different than the other ones. And it's different in a way that he is trying to convey a topic. He is writing this book called He Who Wrestles with God. But he needs, when you're writing something, just as when I'm doing this podcast, as I'm getting ready to do this podcast, I have a set of ideas and thoughts that I want to convey, but I don't really know until I get feedback from you. And that is what he wants. He said, I've spent a great amount of time researching and putting this together, and it's satisfactory to me, but I need to know how it lands. Just like a comedian who can write some jokes, but until you get up on stage and talk it out, you need that reaction. And so it was an invitation to us as audience members to give him that feedback. And interestingly, the feedback really is, are you paying attention? And what does that look like? Are you shifting around in your chair? All of those kinds of things. So let me kind of start with just talking about what it means and understanding this whole topic of he who wrestles with God, because it really comes from the biblical story on Genesis 32, verses 22 through 32. And it's really the aspect of Jacob who's wrestling until daybreak. And he's showing his tenacity and unwillingness to give up, even when faced with an immense challenge. And this is really about our life's struggles. And so after this struggle that Jacob went through, he's renamed Israel, which means he who wrestles with God. So this marks a significant transformation in Jacob's life regarding his character, his personal growth, and going through trials and tests. And so if you think of God as the greatest good, we're wrestling through this in our own lives. How can I be better? How can I do that which is good? And there's some themes that kind of go through this, and just if you think about that there's blessing through struggle. This is one of the themes. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. But in this story, Jacob's hip was dislocated. And so this really underscores the idea that struggles, while challenging, can lead to profound blessings and insights. The story also illustrates the paradox of vulnerability and strength. And so you may begin to understand and realize that it is through vulnerability that is our strength. When somebody is being vulnerable with you, you trust them, they're relatable. You could step on them, and you could call them a fool. You could call them soft. You could call them weak. You could do all of those things. But Jacob is showing his vulnerability and struggling with a divine figure. Yet it's this very struggle that exhibits the strength and determination, because if you're not struggling with it, then it doesn't matter. You don't struggle with things that don't matter. Let me put it that way. So for me, I'm just going to give this kind of some personal context. I've been a Christian really since I was 12. I accepted Christ, but I've also been a math major. I've been a computer science major. I've been a physics minor. And so logic is like a really important aspect of my life. And so this idea that we have to have blind faith and that we need to just put our logic aside, this has been my wrestling. Like, which is more important, science or religion? And Jordan Peterson did an amazing job in his talk of actually speaking to me in that regard, and really came to a significant conclusion on that. And that is the fact that there is no science without an aim. In other words, there's no, that science is a religion unto itself that believes that there is something that can be proven, and in understanding the world, that number one, it is understandable, and that it is understandable through logic, and that when we understand it, it is enlightening. And so it is a pursuit of enlightenment, to understand, to know, and that's not possible without actually an underlying moral ethic. And so there actually is no science without a moral ethic. And he walked through a lot of examples of that, and that's kind of a really interesting piece of the major theme here. And maybe you don't struggle with science or religion. Maybe you struggle with just, blind faith versus logic, or why good things happen to bad people, or why bad things happen to good people, right? It's both of those. And there's, a key takeaway with this in terms of this topic. What he did is he explained something in kind of philosophical terms, and my wife turned to me, and this was early on. She's like, "I'm already lost." And that's Jordan Peterson for you. So he does this wandering around, and he said, let me make this concrete for you. And he began talking about being on a first date. And so the way to understand how science and religion are dependent on one another, it really is about our aim. And so when you're on a first date, and he walks through the entire process, it was quite humorous. But he talked about being on a first date, and you're in a crowded restaurant. There's conversations going on all around you. There's noise from the restaurant itself. And you are in conversation. And so hopefully, if it's a good date, you're engaged with one another. You're looking at one another, and you're not paying attention to all of the conversations around you. You're paying attention to the person right in front of you. Because if you're not doing that, like, it's just not going to be a good date. And so there's plenty of things happening all around us that we just ignore. And so when you relate this back to this idea of science being a religious pursuit, it is a pursuit of finding the truth. We think, well, the facts are just there, and that we just follow the facts, and there you go. But that's not at all how it happens. And he used this example of dating to kind of show that, because the facts are there's conversations everywhere, and I can pay attention to any of them. And we call that a distraction, but we're distracted from what? We're distracted from our aim. What is it that we are pursuing? And I'm pursuing this other person in this date. And so I'm ignoring all these other facts. And so the reality of this time in my date is 100% focused on my aim. And even though there's plenty of other facts, I'm choosing to ignore them all. And so we think in science, well, we just follow the facts. But the question is, which facts? They have to be the facts of my aim because there are too many other facts. And this is super important because we look at the world today and we have all of this stuff, and we have buildings, and we have cities, and we have governments, and we have all of these things. And we just assume that they were always there, but they weren't. They have been developed over generations and generations and generations for thousands of years, and they've been based on a vision of what could be, a vision of how we work together, a vision of family, a vision of society, a vision of commonality. And I think this narrative, and he talked about this narrative of that it's been built on a different vision, a vision of power, a vision of dominance, a vision of the strong survive. Well, that's kind of true in the animal kingdom, sort of. And it's true because we have wars, but why do we have wars? It's because we have differences of opinions, right? But it's not how we raise our family. Like I'm not married because I have power over my wife. I'm not going on this date because I have power over you. I'm not parenting my kids because it's a power play. No, it's a play of love. And love is not scientific. Like, what's the proof of love? How do you prove that scientifically? Well, there's amount of time that you spend, and there's things that you do and sacrifices you make, but none of those are provable. At what point in time, like, what's the equation for that? And it's like, we don't know. It's not scientifically provable. So, because there's too many facts. So he talked about dating. It was pretty funny. He talked about dancing a lot. But he also talked about a friend. So, when you have young kids, first they're playing on their own. And when they're 2 years old, and you might have a friend over, but they're still playing alone. It's not till 3 or 4 that they begin to play with another person. And when you have a friend, when you play with someone else, it can no longer be a selfish thing. You just can't always get your way, right? That's why little kids don't want to share toys. But eventually you need to share toys. So you have to sacrifice when you have a friendship. You have to sacrifice your way for a new way, our way, where it's beneficial to both of us. That if we're going to play a game, you're going to win half the time, I'm going to win half the time, or some percentage. I need to at least win sometimes. Otherwise, I don't want to play that game anymore, right? I need to have the opportunity to win. But it's a sacrifice, right? And so sacrifice is the way. And so this is so interesting because Christ is the way. He says, I am the way. And so what does that mean? Well, it means you got to believe in him. What does believing in him mean? It means his way. Well, what was his way? His way was the cross. His way was sacrifice. And so we've got to make sacrifices, sacrifices. We have to sacrifice ourselves for the benefit of others. That is the way, his way. I am the way, the truth, and the life. The only way to the Father, the greatest good, is through me, the one who sacrificed how much? Everything. He who sacrificed, I no longer call you, I call you friend, right? And now I've shown you everything. So good. He also got into country a little bit, or at least maybe this was me jumping to this conclusion. So this is what happens when you're listening to Jordan Peterson. Is my mind just goes all over the place because he teaches a philosophy. It teaches you how your brain works, and then my mind just starts cruising. But I just started thinking about in God we trust. Like our country was built on the dollar, literally says on the back, in God we trust. And so God is the greatest good. What's the greatest good for our country is that we sacrifice ourselves for others. Same thing. And this recognition that everything we have today is based on this common vision. This is what makes America great. But that vision is cracking now because we don't all see God the same way. In fact, we don't believe in God, or we think religion is an old idea, that there are new ideas. And all of those things become your God. And so part of wrestling with God is the recognition that you and I might not see the same God. Your God might not be my God, even though we're both Christians. My God might be this job that I'm pursuing. My God might be this car that I want to get. My God might be I'm pouring my life into my kids, and that's all that matters. My God, like, these aren't bad or good things, but it's like the greatest good. We see God the Father. So how do you see him? Is he judging you, or is he loving you? And I've talked about this before. I see God as like a scale, like when I step on the weight scale, that God is not judging me any more than the scale is judging me. That when I step on the scale, I am now aligning myself with what is. This is why God says, I am who I am. He is the very existence of being. And so I measure my being with his being. And am I saying, am I all I can become? I have an aim. I have a weight that I want to achieve. I step on the scale and it lets me know how I'm doing. And if I'm doing well, great. I am in alignment. If I'm not, I am no longer aligned with what? With the scale. And so God being a scale, and the law is just a scale. If you want to be in society, then these commandments, these are solid. This is why Moses went to the mountain and he said, I've been dealing with all of these people in the desert, and I've been dealing with fights. I've been dealing with all of these challenges. And this is how I've been dealing with them. And he comes down from the mountain and he goes, guys, these are the 10 laws. These are the 10 things that we need to do. And they were accepted because it's what he was doing, right? And it is the finger of God that writes these things. And so the first is to put no other God before me. So no other idols. And so we have so many idols in our life. Your idol might be music. Your idol might be your job status. Your idol might be, for me, hockey's a hobby. I could make that my idol. I could spend all of my time learning all of the stats, all of the players, everything. But now it's just consumed me. And so what are you going to be consumed with? So these are just really important contexts. So in God we trust as a country, the greatest good, what is that? That's that we're all rowing together in one way. And yes, we have to wrestle with these things. We have to wrestle through our politics. And we can look at Democrats versus Republicans, but they should be wrestling. But if we don't wrestle with words, then we wrestle with fists. And so politicking is so important because it's more important that we talk things through than kill each other over it, right? That's the whole idea. So I was one that just, I don't like politics, but I have learned that it is so important. But we have to come together. We have to have conversations, because in the absence of doing that, we have war. We don't have peace. Quiet is not peace. Peace sometimes is wrestling. Yeah, so just interesting concept. So what does this have to do with, so that's the country aspect. I want to relate this back to us as dads, as us as men. And I'm just going to share something. I'm going to be vulnerable here. So as I was hitting my 40s, things were going good in business. I was having more kids, had 6 kids. Things were going well, putting kids in private school, all this good stuff going. And I was still going to church, doing all those things. But I was actually working on my retirement. I was pursuing my life of ease. And so I was working hard, but the goal was retirement. So I can retire early so that I can do what? Nothing. So I can do whatever I want, right? And I was making a sacrifice to do that, but my aim was so that I could have a life of ease. My aim wasn't to be disciplined to have a life of sacrifice. It's like, who wants to do that? I think about the book of Job. Like, who wants to be that? But Job is one of the oldest, if not the oldest story in the Bible. And it is a story of somebody that was wrestling with God because so much was coming at him. And he just dealt with it. He had many chances. And in fact, everybody was encouraging him, just throw your fist and curse God. And he's like, no. What does that mean? Throw your fist and curse God. It means throw your fist and curse the greatest good so that you can become bitter, so that you can become angry, so that you can be justified, so that you can say, not your will, but mine be done. That's the complete opposite of what needs to happen. And so recognize that, I heard this morning from a great guy, Joshua, who I've just met. Job was the map maker. He didn't have a Bible. He thought God was cursing him, but God was allowing Satan to deal with him. And so he was blaming himself, but he was never cursing God, right? And so that's it. Satan wants you to be bitter about your situation. He wants you to feel you don't deserve it, you're not worth it, all of those things. But that's not going to help you become all you could be. What's going to help you become all you can be are the little sacrifices you make every day. And as I was pursuing the life of ease, my health started to go. I was having a good time, but I wasn't exercising every morning. My weight's going up, my health is going up, my blood pressure is going up. All of these things are kind of falling. I wasn't eating properly. I was eating good food, right? The rich foods, all those things. I have since learned, you think about Job making sacrifices. You think about Cain and Abel making sacrifices. I listened to David Goggins tell his story. There's a guy that makes sacrifices. To me, he's like a modern day Job. He's a modern day Job because that guy sacrifices. He puts himself through so much pain and so disciplined. And you would think, well, he just loves running because the guy runs like ultra marathons and all kinds of stuff. And he's like, I hate it. I push through the pain. And I was teaching this to my grandson the other day. It's like all good things are on the other side of the sacrifice, on the other side of pain. This is why heaven is through the pain and suffering of life, right? But it's not just after you die, you can have that today. So while physical things may take time to change, spiritual things can change in an instant. How does that happen? It happens because I've changed my mind about this circumstance. Like, there is a good in here somewhere, and I will find it. And when I find it, everything changes in an instant, right? And so this is the spiritual life. What is the spirit that's dwelling within you? And when you recognize that the world is a tough place, and that if I am mentally tough, and that my aim is proper, I can put things in the right perspective, so I can get a heavenly view of an earthly circumstance, a higher view, a penthouse view. And so this is the meaning of repentance. When I repent, I change my thinking. I penthouse view, so that I am looking down on what is going on. I have risen above it, and so now I'm no longer in it, but it is not my, because there's an inner voice in you that is the real you. There's a conscious thought that comes to you that's not you. Where is that coming from? It is the higher consciousness. And it is saying, well, you could do this or you could do that. And I want to do this, but it's saying, that's probably not a good idea. Hello, right? It's Jiminy Cricket in Pinocchio. So just really understanding that doing hard things rather than taking the easy way is actually the proper way. Narrow is the road, right? The wide life is the enticing life. I can have this, I can do that, I can be this, all of those things. But narrow is the path. So what does that mean? Discipline is a narrow path. So a disciplined life, not going for the easy way, but doing the hard things every day, thanking God that I can exercise this morning rather than I could be sitting in a cancer chair right now. Thank God I get to do this. Sacrificing so that I'm doing for others rather than doing for myself, being self-sacrifice. There's no greater love than this, he who lays down his life for another, right? And so understanding that you need to motivate yourself, and your motivation can take you down a bitter path, and I'd be really careful of that. If you're bitter about something, now your motivation has changed from good to evil, because I want to see them hurt. I want them to feel what I feel. My emotions are carrying me, right? But you're in control of that. And you go, whoa, not my will, yours be done, Lord. So what is Lord's will? It is love. Love your enemy, right? How do you get that to be a motivating? Self-sacrifice. Narrow is the way. Discipline. There's no coincidence that it says make disciples, right? So what does it mean to be a disciple? It means I am a follower of the way of self-sacrifice. The truth. The truth is, if I go down this path, is death and destruction. If I go down this path, is life. How long? Everlasting. Meaning, immediately I change my thinking. Immediately I'm in a better place. Because here I am. Because if I was hurt in the past, I am living in the past, and my motivation is to fix the past rather than design the future. And if I'm living too much in the future, then I'm anxious about what do I need to be doing, or I am frustrated because I'm not there yet, and so I'm not in the moment. And so part of Christ's message here is be in the moment. So recognize who you are becoming, and recognize you are not there yet, but you can be. And so try again. This is the message of Christ. This is why we need grace. I step on the scale. The Father God, I am judged. Is he judging me? No, I'm actually judging myself against the scale. And Christ is saying, you're good. try again. He's saying you're good. He's not saying you're good where you are, stay there. Stay in your pain, stay in your misery, stay in your suffering, stay in your bitterness, stay in that. He's not saying that. He's saying, I love you, I believe in you, try again, and I'm going to equip you. This is the difference between grace. I forgive you, but you need to forgive yourself so that you can try again. Like, pick yourself up, dust yourself off. So when we sin, it is that we have an aim and we missed it. That's literally what it means. Jordan Peterson talked about this. And so I missed it. So I think of that and I think Christ says, hey, you messed up. Here's another arrow. Try again, right? That's grace. Mercy is not getting what you deserve. Grace is not only not getting what you deserve, but you get to try again. And I'm going to equip you more and better next time. I'm going to actually credit your account. So that's just a strong takeaway, right? So as a wrap up, Jordan Peterson, the event for me was amazing. I know some people were very confused by it, and I think I would love to hear from those that maybe got nothing out of it or those that were pumped up, but he is, I really believe this about him. I think Jordan Peterson is going to do more to bring people to Christ than probably anyone else I know of, heard of in today's world. I think the church is doing a really bad job of it, honestly. And I love our church, and I think we're doing a decent job of it. I think we're trying, but I think the church in general is failing. It's failing at connecting with young people. It's failing at connecting the idea that God has many, many facets to him, and that the Bible is a set of stories, because we all live in a story, and stories are how we understand the world. And we have this God that's really hard to understand, but he's always the greatest good. And in that, it's hard to understand what might be the greatest good from this. How is it good that bad people get good things? Well, because we can't see inside their life. And we don't know all that there is to know. There's too many facts, right? So just a couple of takeaways here and some conclusions. What you pay attention to grows. So if you're paying attention to the past and wishing you could do things over and all of that, that's just going to continue to grow. The past is only useful in the lessons that you've learned. And so don't dwell on the past other than to, what do I need to take away from that? What is the learning from that? Now I can put that aside and I go, I got it. That's locked in. I'm not going to make decisions this way anymore. I need to make decisions in a new way. I can be wiser about that. There was a lesson there. Thank God I've learned this lesson now, right? Aim for the highest good and pay attention to that. What is the good that's possibly could come from this circumstance? Aim for that and become the best version of yourself. And then I think the other thing is that we need to show up for others. It's not my will, but yours be done, God, which means I put down my ego. My will is my ego. I'm going to put that down. Yours be done, Lord, because it's not about me. It's about us together, collectively, as a married couple, as a family, as a city, as a community, as a church body, as a nation. And it is in God we trust. I don't trust the government. I don't trust these politicians. I don't trust any of that. I trust in God. I trust in the greatest good. And as one who is the image of God, it is incumbent upon me that which I manifest. Am I manifesting good in the world, or am I manifesting anger, frustration, bitterness. Right? So if you want to manifest, well, just think on that. Just think on that. So I want to encourage you today. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for participating. And just know that I love you. But more importantly, God loves you, that you are loved, that you are forgiven, that you have a chance to try again. And don't worry about who you are right now. It is who you become. And God sees so much more in you than you see in yourself. That he loves you. He loves your kids. He loves your family. He loves this world. And you have an important role to play in this. That what you aim for makes all the difference. So, I love you. Have a great day.